Jai Hind students, today we will study the class 10 science chapter life processes. So let's talk about life processes. What are life processes? How will we decide whether something is alive or not? Now in lower classes, you remember you talked about when something moves, it is alive. Now in class 10, we will decide with the help of some basic processes in living organisms which are necessary for maintaining life. Now, what are the different processes in all the organisms which are necessary for maintaining life? The four processes, as you can see on the screen, are: the first one is nutrition. What is nutrition? It is the process of taking food by an organism and its utilization by the body for life processes. The second one is respiration, which is the process in which the food is burnt in the cells of the body with the help of oxygen to release energy. The third one is transportation. Now once we take in nutrition and we have all the substances in our body, they need to be transported to all the cells of the body. So transportation is the process by which food, oxygen, water, carbon dioxide and other products are carried from one body part to another. And the last one is excretion, which is the process by which waste products are removed from the body. Nonetheless, it is one of the most important life processes. Now let's come to the first one. Let's talk about nutrition. When we say nutrition, think of the word food. Now nutrition is the process of taking food by an organism and its utilization by the body to build the body, for growth, for repair of damaged part of the body and for energy. Now if you remember, there are various modes of nutrition in different organisms. So the two basic modes that we have and two types of organisms that we have are: the first type of nutrition is autotrophic nutrition, the nutrition in which an organism prepares food on their own from simple or inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. So all of you know about the process of photosynthesis, which you have studied in the previous classes. Then we have heterotrophic nutrition. Now this is the nutrition in which organisms get their food directly or indirectly from plant. So all animals, fungi and some bacteria, they are heterotrophic. Now coming to heterotrophic nutrition, there are various types of heterotrophic nutrition. Let's discuss them. So first one is saprophytic. If you remember in class 9, you studied the kingdom fungi. So fungi, if you remember, they are saprophytes. So in saprophytic nutrition, the organism, it breaks down the food outside its body and then absorbs it. So a fungi will release enzymes on dead and decaying matter, will digest it outside the body and then absorb it. Then we have the second type, which is the parasitic nutrition. What will happen in parasitic nutrition is that there will be an organism which will basically go and occupy the body of the host. Now then it will keep taking nutrients from the body of the host, but it will not kill the host. So there you must have heard of organisms like leeches, ticks. Then in plants there is amabale or cascata. These all organisms, they are parasites. Then you have holozoic nutrition. What is holozoic nutrition? Where organism takes in food, it ingests it, then it digests the food, then it absorbs and utilizes the food. So various organisms, unicellular organisms like amoeba is there, paramecium is there, then birds, fishes, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, all these animals have holozoic nutrition in them. Okay, now let's start with autotrophic nutrition. So if you remember the process of photosynthesis in plants, let's quickly do a recap of photosynthesis. So what are the raw materials required for photosynthesis? So there are 5. So we have water, we have carbon dioxide, we have chlorophyll, we have minerals, and we have sunlight. So by utilizing these raw materials, green plants prepare their own food. Okay, and if you can see the equation of photosynthesis, the 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, when they combine with 12 molecules of water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, will give you 1 molecule of glucose and will release 6 molecules of water and 6 molecules of oxygen. Now what are the steps of photosynthesis? So there are 3 steps. So the first one, as you can see on the screen, the first step is absorption of light energy, and that happens through chlorophyll. Chlorophyll absorbs it. Then the second step is conversion of light energy to chemical energy, and splitting of water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. And the third one is reduction of carbon dioxide by hydrogen to form carbohydrates. So you must have seen this diagram of photosynthesis in your previous classes. Just take a quick recap of this. Okay, now let's discuss stomata. All of you have studied about stomata and they are present in plants. What is the function of stomata and how does the stomata look like? Now if you see, stomata is basically made up of two guard cells. Now these two guard cells have an opening between them which is called the stomatal pore, or it may be called the stomatal opening. It can also be called stoma. The guard cells, they can open and close, okay, and they have chloroplast in it. When water enters the guard cells, they become turgid and the stomatal opening, it opens up. So this happens during the daytime when photosynthesis occurs and easy exchange of gases takes place, and the stomatal opening remains open. During the night especially, or in some other conditions, the water leaves the guard cells. When the water leaves the guard cells, the guard cells become flaccid. Once they become flaccid, they shrivel up and the stomatal opening, it closes. Right? So during the night generally, this also prevents transpiration. Okay. Now let's start with holozoic nutrition in animals. So first we'll take up the example of a unicellular organism like amoeba. Now if you remember, amoeba is a protozoan and it has pseudopodia to move. It is found in aquatic habitats. Now an amoeba, with the help of pseudopodia, if you see the diagram on the board, will extend its pseudopodia. When a food particle comes, it will engulf the food particle around it and then form a food vacuole. It will form a food vacuole. Once the food vacuole is formed, the amoeba will release enzymes on the food particle, digest it, absorb it, and utilize the nutrients. So this is what we learned, holozoic nutrition in unicellular organism. Now let's come to human beings. What happens in human beings? So you recall the digestive system that you studied in class 7. So do you remember? So this is the human digestive system, as you can see on the board. So let's discuss the various parts of the human digestive system. So we have the mouth, we have the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and anus. And the main glands are salivary glands, gastric glands, livers, pancreas, and intestinal glands. So now let's discuss the human digestive system in detail. So what happens in the mouth? The mouth is also called the buccal cavity. It is made up of three things, remember, the teeth, the saliva, and salivary glands. Okay, so the teeth, they help in grinding the food. The saliva is released from the salivary gland, and the tongue helps to mix up saliva with the food and convert it into a paste. Now chewing is a very, very important part, as this is the first step of digestion that takes place in our body. The saliva contains an enzyme called salivary amylase. Now salivary amylase is an enzyme which converts starch into simple sugars. So when we are chewing the food and the saliva get mixed up with it, the food is also breaking down. So remember to chew the food well when you are eating. Let's come to the stomach. Now the food, after we swallow it, it passes through the esophagus or the food pipe, and throughout the gut there is a special movement called peristaltic movement. Now with the help of this peristaltic movement, the food moves throughout the gut where the rhythmic contraction of the gut takes place. Now let's come to the stomach. Now stomach, remember, is a J-shaped muscular bag. Now look at the stomach over here. Now the stomach has it's a muscular bag. It is very elastic, right? And in the internal lining of the stomach you have gastric glands. Now gastric glands, they release three juices. They release hydrochloric acid, they release pepsin, and they release mucus. Now let's discuss the function of these three. The hydrochloric acid, it creates an acidic medium and also helps in the activation of the enzyme pepsin. Pepsin only works in acidic medium. Secondly, hydrochloric acid also kills the bacteria which we engulf when we swallow the food in our body, right? Now let's come to pepsin. Now pepsin, as I told, works only in acidic medium, which HCl provides. Also pepsin helps in the breakdown of proteins, right? And third is the mucus. Now mucus is a sticky substance which is found on the inner lining of the stomach. Now hydrochloric acid, which is released in the stomach, is an extremely strong acid. If mucus is not present, the hydrochloric acid will start corroding the internal lining of the stomach. So mucus is basically a protective layer for the stomach. Okay, so stomach churns the food, digests it, converts it into liquid, and also digestion of protein takes place over here. Let's come to the next step. Now the food moves to the small intestine. Now once the food reaches the small intestine, liver, it produces bile. Now bile juice is produced by liver and stored in gallbladder. Once the food reaches the small intestine, the bile juice is then released into the small intestine. Bile juice emulsifies the food. Now what is emulsification? There are big droplets of fat found in the food. Now enzymes cannot work on them. So bile breaks up the big droplets of fat into very, very small droplets, increases the surface area. This process is known as emulsification. Also, the bile is alkaline. So it creates an alkaline medium. In small intestine, the enzymes can only work when the medium is alkaline. While, remember, in stomach, the medium has to be acidic. Okay, so then we also have the pancreas. Just look at the location of pancreas in the diagram. Now, pancreas also releases digestive enzymes. The two digestive enzymes with the pancreas release, the first one is trypsin. Now, trypsin is an enzyme which breaks down protein, and the second one is lipase. Lipase breaks down fats, right? And besides this, the small intestine also has intestinal glands. Now, intestinal glands also release intestinal juices, which basically cause the complete digestion of food inside the small intestine. So, what happens over there? The carbohydrates are completely digested into glucose, the proteins are completely digested into amino acids, and the fats are completely digested into fatty acid and glycerol. Now food is completely digested. What is the next thing that should happen? Absorption. So the small intestine has a special design. The whole surface, the internal surface of small intestine is covered with finger-like projection which are called the villi. The villi increase the surface area of small intestine and are lined with blood capillaries which help in the absorption of food. Right? So absorption of food occurs now in the small intestine. Once the food is absorbed over there, what is left is undigested food which is passed on to the large intestine. Have a look at the large intestine in the diagram. Now large intestine does not play any role in further digestion. The food is completely digested. So what is the role of large intestine? It basically absorbs excess water and salts from the remaining undigested food. Large intestine also has villi in the internal lining. The food is then passed on to the anus, and through the anal sphincter, the undigested food is passed out. Okay, now let's come to the next life process, that is respiration. So what is respiration? Respiration is the process by which food is burned in the cells of the body with the help of oxygen to release energy, and it takes place in the mitochondria of the cell. So there are two main types of respiration. The first one is aerobic respiration and the second one is anaerobic respiration. So what is aerobic respiration? It takes place in the presence of oxygen. It produces more energy. And the end product of aerobic respiration are carbon dioxide, water and energy. Now if you look at the diagram over here, glucose in the presence of oxygen in the cytoplasm of the cell is converted into pyruvate. The pyruvate then in the presence of oxygen in mitochondria is converted into carbon dioxide, water and energy. So this is aerobic respiration. Let's come to anaerobic respiration, which takes place in absence of oxygen, and it produces less energy as compared to aerobic respiration. And the end products of anaerobic respiration are lactic acid, ethanol and carbon dioxide and energy. And anaerobic respiration takes place in muscle cells and yeast. So if you look over here, in the absence of, see the second arrow, so in the absence of oxygen in muscle cells when we are doing physical activity, so instead of carbon dioxide, water and energy, lactic acid and energy is produced. So you remember when once you do a lot of physical activity, you run or you dance, you end up with cramps in your muscles. This happens because of this. And the second case of anaerobic respiration occurs in yeast. Again, absence of oxygen. So ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy is produced. Okay, now let's come to the respiratory system of human beings. So what are the main organs of respiratory system in human beings? We have the nostrils. Just have a look at the diagram. Then we have the nasal cavity. We have the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi which branch into bronchioles, and obviously we have the lungs and the diaphragm. Okay, now the air, it enters through the nostril, the hair and mucus, that traps the dust particles. Then it passes through the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi and enter the lungs. Now the trachea, if you have a look over here, has rings of cartilage in it, which prevents the collapse of trachea. So when there is no air in the trachea, the bronchi divides into smaller tubules called bronchioles, which end in tiny air sac, have a look, called alveoli. Now alveoli are supplied with blood vessels through which exchange of gases take place. The alveoli, they help to increase the surface area for exchange of gases. If you see, there are small balloon-like structures in the diagram over there. So these are alveoli heavily lined with capillaries. So what is the mechanism of breathing? So when we breathe in air, the muscles of the diaphragm, they contract and they move downwards, and the chest cavity expands and the air enters to the lungs. And when we breathe out air, the muscles of the diaphragm, they relax, move upwards, and the chest cavity contracts and the air goes out of the lungs. Okay, so let's come to the third life process, that is transportation. Now, these are the main components of the transportation system in human beings. So the first one is blood. You already have studied about blood, arteries, veins and capillaries in the previous classes. So what is blood? Basically, it's a liquid connective tissue, if you remember, and it transports food, oxygen, waste products, and the main components are RBCs, that is the red blood cells, the WBCs and the platelets. And the matrix is plasma, if you remember, so which helps to transport food, water, carbon dioxide and nitrogenous waste. Now, RBCs or the red blood cells, they transport oxygen. The WBCs or the white blood cells, they kill harmful microbes and protects the body. And platelets, they help in clotting of the blood and prevent loss of blood during an injury. The arteries are the thicker vessels. They carry pure blood, that means the oxygenated blood, from heart to all parts of the body, and they are thick walled and they do not have any valves. And while the veins, they carry impure or the deoxygenated blood from all parts of the body to the heart, and they are thin walled and they have valves in them. Now the capillaries are very, very narrow blood vessels which connect arteries and veins together. The exchange of food, water, oxygen, carbon dioxide, etc. between blood and cells take place through the arteries. Okay, so let's discuss the heart, which is the pumping organ in our body. Now, heart is a muscular organ which pumps blood to all parts of the body. It has 4 chambers. So the 2 upper chambers that you see in the diagram over here, they are called the atria, and the 2 lower chambers are called the ventricles. Now, since the ventricles, they pump blood to different organs, the walls of the ventricles you will see are thicker than the walls of the atria. And the right and the left side of the heart are separated by a septum or a wall, which prevents the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. And they also have valves in them to prevent backflow of blood inside them. So that's the diagram of the heart, and that is how the blood circulates in the body. Let's discuss this now. Now, if you see over here, just have a look over here. So when the left atrium, it relaxes, oxygenated blood from the lung flows into it through pulmonary vein. And when it contracts, the left ventricle expands and the blood flows into it. The left ventricle contracts and oxygenated blood is pumped out through the aorta to all parts of the body. After circulating through all the parts of the body, the deoxygenated blood enters the right atrium through the superior and the inferior vena cava. Once the blood reaches the right atrium, the valve between the right atrium and the right ventricle, it opens, the blood flows down, and then the heart contracts, and through the pulmonary artery, the blood goes to the lung and gets the deoxygenated blood gets oxygenated. Since the blood has to go through the heart twice during one cycle, it is called double circulation. Okay. Now let's come to lymph. Now what is lymph? It is a colorless fluid present in the intercellular space. It is formed from plasma which escapes from the capillaries. And lymph drains into the lymphatic capillaries which form the lymph vessels and joins into large veins. Lymph basically transports digested fat and drains excess fluid from the intercellular spaces back to the blood. And it also contains lymphocytes which help in fighting against germs and protecting the body against various diseases. Okay, now we have discussed transportation in human beings. Let's discuss transportation in plants. You remember studying tissues in class 9? We studied xylem and phloem, the structure of xylem and phloem. So now how they work, let's study that. So xylem, it transports water and minerals from the roots to all parts of the plant. Remember, only in upward direction. And it consists of xylem vessels and trachees. Now water and minerals, they enter the root through diffusion. And how are they transported? Through the transpirational or the suction pull which is created when the process of transpiration is taking place all the time in the leaves. Remember, water is evaporating continuously through stomata. When it evaporates, it creates a suction pull and the water moves upwards to all the parts of the plant. And what happens in phloem? In phloem, translocation of food occurs. And phloem consists of sieve tubes and companion cells. Food from the leaves is transferred to the xylem by the energy of ATP molecules. Due to osmotic pressure, water enters phloem and help in the transport of food. Now between xylem and phloem, the movement of water in xylem is a passive process, does not require any energy. While translocation of food, it requires energy from ATP molecules. So remember this. Okay, so let's come to the last life process, which is excretion. Now excretion is the process by which waste products are removed from the body, and these waste products are formed when the various metabolic activities takes place in our body. It is very, very important to remove these waste products because these are toxic, and when accumulated in the body, they can lead to a lot of diseases. So it is imperative that waste excretory system functions well in our body. So let's first discuss the human excretory system. It consists of a pair of kidneys. All of us have two kidneys, a pair of ureter, one urinary bladder and a urethra. Now each kidney has a number of excretory units, or the functional units as they are known as, and they are called nephron. Now see how a nephron looks like. So each nephron, just have a look over there, has a Bowman's capsule. Then it has a mass of capillaries called the glomerulus. And once the glomerulus, then it goes to through the tubule, and finally it reaches the collecting duct. Now let's discuss how urine is formed. Now as I told you the structure, I discussed the structure of the nephron. Now the renal artery, over here just have a look at the renal artery. The renal artery, it brings nitrogenous waste like ammonia, urea and uric acid along with excess water and salts into the nephron. And it filters the nitrogenous waste, water and salts, which passes through the tubular structure, and then into the collecting duct. Now look at the tubular structure of the nephron, and then look at the collecting duct of the nephron. So the urine passes over there and it's collected in the collecting duct. The water then passes through the ureters into the urinary bladder and is sent out through the urethra as urine. Now, when the blood is filtered, a lot of useful products are also filtered. So, when the urine is passing through the tubular part of the nephron, products like amino acids, glucose, salts, and other materials are reabsorbed by the capillaries and sent back to the blood. Now, this process where these substances are reabsorbed by the nephron and sent back into the blood is known as selective reabsorption. It's a very, very important part of the process when the urine is formed. Okay, So let's come to the last topic of the chapter, which is excretion in plants. Now if you remember, plants have stomata. I discussed the structure of stomata. Now stomata, through stomata, a lot of waste products are released. Now think of the waste products which can be released through stomata. One is oxygen, okay, that occurs during photosynthesis. Oxygen is a waste product. Then the plants also breathe, so carbon dioxide is released, so that is also a waste product released through the stomata. Then water continuously is removed from the plants through transpiration, so that is also an excretory products in the plants. Then some waste products are stored in the leaves and removed when the leaves they dry and fall. You must have seen leaves drying and falling off, so that is also a part of the excretory system that occurs through the plants. And some waste products are stored in vacuoles, and also some waste products like gums, resin are stored in old xylem cells, and some waste products are removed through the roots. So this is all about the chapter life processes. I hope it was a good session, and thank you students.